and if it takes off on a different tangent, then I'm just going to let it go.
Yeah, absolutely. That's fine.
Cool. So we'll get started now. Hi, and welcome to the Raw Heart and Soul podcast. Today I've got a very special guest, Monica Meldrum. I met Monica, gosh, I think it was about at least 12 years ago, I think. When Monica came to me for personal training, when I first became a personal trainer at Fitness First in Collins Street. And at the time she had this big idea, and I think you were working on it then, Monica, but we'll go into that in a second. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, so let me see. I am the founder, owner of Whole Kids. So we produce Australia's largest range of certified organic, additive-free, allergen-friendly snacks for kids. I am one of 6 kids. I have lots of nephews and nieces, which is kind of how this idea came about. Really interested in health and fitness and just really supporting families with good nutrition for their children.
What were you doing before you started with Whole Kids? Because I know when you started with training with me, you weren't in the business. I know you were doing it on the side.
Yeah.
What were you doing before that?
I was working in the building industry with a cement manufacturer, interestingly. So in manufacturing, but I think for me, the seed for Whole Kids was planted a few years before that when I speak fluent Indonesian, and only because I went to uni, Paul Keating had this big push into Asia. We had to have a language. But I became really good at it. I was singing in a Indonesian reggae band. But as a result of that, I had this opportunity to travel to Indonesia to lead a team of 16 Australians with the Department of Foreign Affairs to an aid program working with children. And when we got there, we had lawyers, doctors, agricultural scientists, and we had to decide what we do with the funds to support the community in a way that was really keeping with the culture, respecting them, and just making a positive difference and working together with them. So we looked at the irrigation systems, we looked at the schools, at the hospitals, but we were just all so struck by the children. They were they were so happy, yet they had nothing. And we kind of just deliberated as a team, and it was monsoon at the time, and they were jumping into the drains. These drains were like a metre deep, by a metre wide, and kids as young as 2 on the backs of their siblings floating downstream. And it just struck me that, it was incredibly unhygienic and unsafe. And if we could create a safe place for the community to gather and for the kids to play, how amazing that would be. So we spent about 3 months where we sourced tyres from clapped out cars in Medan. We went to a local plantation and sourced timber, and we built this kind of almighty playground. And as it was being built and happening, these kids were coming, they were interacting, and it was just the most joyful experience. It just really sat with me. And then I was working in corporate, and James, my husband, he'd studied an MBA in the US, and when he was there, he learned about companies like Ben Jerry's and Patagonia, and these businesses that existed for more than just profit. They were all about creating a positive impact in the world and making a difference. And, we were both a little disgruntled with what we were doing. My brothers and sisters were all having kids. One of them had severe allergies. I had a real interest in health and nutrition, so I was looking at the food they were eating, and looking also at these big food manufacturers who were just producing foods that were over processed, marketing them as healthy, using tactics to hook kids. Yeah, that's right. And just thought, wouldn't it be amazing if we could create this business that not only contributed directly to kids' health, but in a much broader way was contributing to positive change in the world and using proceeds from the products to support kids' health and the environment. So we just kind of, we worked on it for about 3 years. We researched it, and then this organic expo came up, and James emailed me one day and said, the first ever organic expo, let's just go. So
Australia's first organic expo?
Australia's first organic expo.
Wow.
So yeah, so we thought that's the stake in the ground. We were ready to put everything in, but we just had to test it. So we went up and we had samples and mock-ups. We weren't really an established business, and the response was overwhelming. There were stores wanting to order product, mums and dads saying there was nothing like it. Kids were interacting with the brand. So I think we really just we hit a spot where we knew that we could confidently go forward, and there was a market for the product.
What was your first product? Because I remember it being sultanas, but is that right?
Yeah, it was. Yeah, that's right. because they were sulfite free. My nephew had asthma, really bad asthma, and the sulfur dioxide is linked to asthmatic reactions in children.
Mm-hmm.
But that's a funny story in itself, because we then started to get a lot of press when we launched, and I was quoted in the Sydney Morning Herald citing that link between sulfur dioxide and asthmatic reactions in children, and literally at 8 a.m. the morning it was printed, and James and I were in a little rented house in Richmond,
yeah.
sitting at the end of a phone fax. We got this call from the managing director of one of Australia's largest fruit growers, and he was like threatening legal action. He was really upset. He was like, I'm going to, you guys, I'm going to squash you. You need to retract the statement. Yeah. So
what do you do in that situation? Like, you're sitting there, you haven't really even launched the company so much as like you're a small fry basically in this big pool of people, and you've got people like that calling you and saying you're done.
I mean, the stupid thing was, if you could see down the end of the phone fax, you would have realised that it was just two people, I felt great fear at the time. I thought, what have I done? I've invested everything in this, but then I stood back and I thought, no, he feels we are such a threat, that in itself is so powerful. And there and then kind of vowed to go, all right, no, we're going to stand up for honesty and transparency. We're going to do this in our way. And, the journalist called and said, this happens all the time with these big companies. They come out with sledgehammers, I'm not going to retract the statement. I'm going to clarify that actually, on their website, they do use sulfur dioxide and there is this link. So, from the start, I think we were just fighting the good fight, and we wanted to push it as far as we could. We had nothing to lose.
Yeah. So after that happened, what was what was the point in time where you both gave up your jobs and realized that this was going to be big?
Yeah, I think we quit our jobs after the expo, so we went all in. But I think the thing for me, the point of realising how big it was we received a call from Qantas, from the head of special meals, and she was receiving so many complaints from parents with kids climbing the walls mid-flight with all the sugar-laden products on their trays. And there was a tender coming up, and she said, I know you're really small, but what you do is pretty amazing. Will you come to Sydney, bring with you 16 sets of samples, and come up to Sydney for this review and present to us, and we'll just see, it could be a really good win-win. And so I got on the plane and I had my samples packed up, but I had this thought, something just popped into my head, 16 sets of samples. The meeting request was only for 2 people, but I was like, what if there's 16 people in this room? And so the plane landed, and I don't do things by halves. I got in my hire car, went to Officeworks, photocopied 15 additional sets of our, presentation, boxed everything up. Got to this meeting just like
with
catching
Qantas.
My breath, and with Qantas,
Qantas,
and sure enough, there were, boardroom open, 16 people sitting in the room, and the head of international meals says, the floor's yours, Monica. I want you to, tell us about Whole Kids and why we should put you on board. But just bearing in mind, you are up against one of the biggest FMCG or fast-moving consumer goods brands in the world, who provide product purely at cost as an advertising expense. Sorry.
That's okay.
So I basically just told them the story and my vision for Whole Kids, and then they all they tried the product, they sampled it, they loved it, but then, again, the head of catering said, realise you're up against some pretty big business here. What can you do in terms of price? And I had nowhere to go. And the funny thing was, I was just so excited to be there that,
you hadn't thought about them asking that question of you?
Yeah. So I ended up just talking. I'd read up a lot about Qantas's vision, and it's about, their philosophy is all around the spirit of Australia. And so I talked to them about how, by supporting a business like ours, to think about the thousands of parents and kids travelling with them, and not only would they be kind of helping them, but they'd be supporting a small Australian business. And I kind of left going, there's no way in hell we'll ever win that business. But
it was a great experience at the time.
Yeah, it was great. But 2 weeks later, I got a call from them saying, we were so impressed. We're putting you not only on domestic, but international, all meals, economy, business, first class. We're going to throw you some editorial with Peter Switzer and Business Mag. And we're also getting Deborah Hutton to do a feature on the business. And that, like, I just remember flying when our product had just launched and seeing this TV screen pop down and Deborah Hutton was there and our logo, and I was like, oh my God, I was the only one on the plane. So I was saying to the stewardess, do you have any of this Whole Kids product? And she's like, no, it's for children, it's not for you. And I'm just like, if only she knew. Like, you know, it was such a big moment. So, and I think from there we were away. That really made our business.
Do you think your philosophy and your belief in what you were bringing to the world, well, obviously it's what sold them?
Yeah, 100%.
Do you think that's what go on?
Look, I think too, in our, you know, we've had some pretty tough negotiations where we have to be savvy, we're commercially savvy, but I think when you meet with people, with buyers, they feel like they're ultimately playing a part in your business. So they'd ordinarily be meeting with sales managers or whoever it is who's doing the deal. So I think when they hear the story, often they just want to help. They want to get on board. And that particular, the head of catering from Qantas, he, when I was named in the 100 Women of Influence and was up in Sydney, and I asked him to come along, him and his wife, and he called me and he said, I'm sorry, I'm not going to come along. What I'd like to do instead, if it's okay with you, is send my daughters, because I think they'd just be so inspired. And, you know, he's just become such a good friend and huge supporter of the business. And I think it's just, you know, there's been deals and there's been people who don't get what we're doing and don't understand it. But that's the beauty of running your own business too, is you just connect with people who, when they do, it's phenomenal.
One of the things I learned early on in my life after watching the Oprah show was that she used to, and it stuck with me, was that she used to write her own checks, and she not write them. She used to sign every check. So she knew every cent and where it was going and what it was being spent on. And she said, if you're a business owner, it's one of the most important things you can ever do. And I wasn't a business owner at the time. Like, this is going back when I was still in high school watching Oprah, but it stuck with me. And it was one of the things that I've carried through with my businesses as well. So regardless of who I've had employed with me, we've got not a business manager, an admin manager who we've had for a long time, but I still write the checks and I still write the wages and pay the wages. And I think that's important in being able to keep in touch with your business. And do you think that personal connection that, like, you the CEO and founder, is going and presenting, and are you still doing that? But do you think that connection has been part of an integral part of growing the business and keeping those connections and those contracts?
Yeah, 100% it has. And that's throughout our entire business. And that's something that I've tried to, you know, she's so right there, just tried to really make sure that we keep that core of the business and our DNA and our values, or, you know, everyone in our team is aware of that. And, you know, that is really important, to be continually writing those checks and knowing where they're going, but also the customer service side and just being really connected with your customers. So people are often shocked that I will call customers if ever we have, you know, an issue or whatever. And we had our first ever quality issue a few weeks back, and it just, you know, threw me into a spin. But I sent emails, I called people, and, you know, another amazing thing, we're running our crowdfund campaign. I had a woman call me last week to say, I just want to know a little bit more. I've never done this. And at the end of the conversation, what transpired was she was one of the people who had an issue with that product. And she said, the reason I'm investing in your brand and in you is the way you and your team handled that, because you were just you took it so seriously. You called, you know, and I was reflecting on it going, you know, one of the most important roles in our business is customer service. And, yeah, you know, I'm thinking about in the future, if we were to scale, how you can still maintain that connection, because it's so important.
It's so important. I was going to ask you that as well. So now that the business is growing, because, well, clearly it has since you've just had sultanas, because you've got a wide range now. But how do you balance that, Monica, with I know in my businesses, I want to be there all the time and I want to be everything for everybody, and learning to delegate. And for me, learning how to manage people, I wasn't good at managing. And I know that part of the business that we just closed 2 years ago, the gym, part of the reason that failed was because of my lack of management of people. I didn't do it well enough, and I fully admit that. But a lot of that has to do with me not wanting to delegate, because I was very worried about my brand being taken out to other places, because people know the style of training that I do, and will often have people come back to us and say, I was doing my program that you're giving me in a gym, and someone came up to me and said, oh, that's an interesting exercise. Have you trained with Tanya or Andrew? So that reputation is very important to me. So for me to delegate and let go of some of that is still a process that I'm learning how to do. How do you balance and manage that with the kids?
Yeah, it's really hard. I think there's all sorts of fears associated with people finding out too much, and you know who you're using for your IP, or and also, yeah, I think it can be a real hindrance to growth if you're not prepared to delegate. But in order to do that, you have to be able to trust people, and you have to have values alignment. And I think it comes back to the people you employ. So, you know, for me over the years, we've made mistakes, and it's always come back to instinctively I've known, but I've, you know, and they say that old saying is hire slow, fire fast, because if someone's not right and they don't, you know, they're not serious about the business. And it's hard when it's a small business because you're laying the foundation, and, you know, we're an established brand now, so we attract like-minded people. But I think also a big thing for me was, there's been a few moments, like paying myself was one, and then you know, because it was a little bit business, but also getting my head around, I used to be so grateful for anyone who wanted to work for me, and I still am 100%, but it was sort of like, oh, they want to come and work for me, how amazing. I can't ask too much of them. You know, whereas it's like, well, no, it's my business. I'm basically paying people to come and do a job, and just being really clear about what their responsibilities are, and being brave enough to have open conversations about when they're not performing, or if the values fit's not there, letting them go. Because I don't know, I'm just a big believer that ultimately, if a business is meant to succeed and is meant to happen, it will. Things will push you in the right direction. So I'm very intuitive like that. Yeah.
What's your spiritual practice, or do you have a spiritual practice that keeps you grounded within yourself?
Yeah, I meditate. Yeah. So meditate, running, I've always found, and training is just finding some headspace. But I think just taking time out to just slowing down, just to sort of try and reflect on things, try and create space. It's really hard with kids.
Especially little ones.
Yeah. So, yeah, just meditate. Yeah, and I just feel my way through things, basically.
Yeah. So in the times where you've made mistakes, or you think that you've made a mistake, it's because you've not been, or that clarity has not been around your instinct. You've ignored that, or you've not heard the whisper.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Yeah. How did having the children, because you had the children long after you had the business, didn't you? How did that, or did that change, or did that enhance your desire to do better for the world?
It just made me completely passionate about what I was doing, and not only from a product perspective, but environmental, and having a daughter too. There's all these moments where I'm just like, oh my God, I just need to create change. I see this child who's so full of potential, and she's 10 now. When she was about 6, I started to see confidence things coming up, and I just thought, the world's a really tough place for girls. And, as her mother, I have a responsibility to either, educate her, or I can do something to change it. And at that time, we just started this incredible partnership with Plan International, where we've given 500,000 breakfasts to school children in Cambodia. And when I met with Plan, the reason I just loved that organisation is that their whole purpose is social equity for children and equality for girls. And it started in the Spanish Civil War, where a journalist found a little boy in the street with a sign hanging around his neck that said, "If you find me, Spain has fallen and my family is gone, please take me in and look after me." And so he started Plan. He started an orphanage. And I was just like, I can't not work with these people. And this project in Cambodia, they, are teaching. What happens is ordinarily children would drop out of school to feed their families, but they've created these incredible gardens that are part of the education process. So kids go to school, they tend the garden, and they take rations home to their family, so they're able to get an education. And I had this moment, as you do when you're running a business, a couple of years ago, where Plan had invited me to visit the project, and because we'd hit that milestone. And I got home one night and I was just like, I've had it. This business, I just got to close the doors. It's just too hard. We had a really big supermarket review and we were being kicked around, and it's just like, it's all too much. But
Yeah.
my daughter came home from school and she had this new school teacher who'd said, I've just written you a letter. Here's my life at home. How about you write me a note about your life at home? So anyway, she wrote this for homework, and I don't know whether I should have done this, but I thought I just got to check in. I've got to read this, see where she's at, what she's said about us. And she'd said in the letter that my mum, she runs this business, Whole Kids, where she's creating healthy, happy lives for kids. She restated our purpose. And she said that we might have an opportunity to go to Cambodia to meet these children. And I'm like, oh, I can't not do this. So I was like, you know what, I'm just going to change it up. I'd been watching her and her little basketball team and thinking a lot and reflecting on their future. And I put it to the mums. I said, will you come with me? Let's take these girls on the best girl-led trip to visit this project. And
I can't stop crying now.
I know. So the first morning we visit this school, 700 students all in bare feet, make a guard of honour, and they're drumming and they're singing, and we get off the bus and I look ahead and there's my little girl, and it's almost like I'm back there. I'm back in Indonesia. Like life has come full circle. And this is why I'm doing this, 100%. This is why I've got to keep doing this as hard as it is. To open their worldview and to give them the, even for boys, to open their worldview and show them that no matter, they can make a difference. They can be part of creating change in the world. And to see these kids interact in the school garden and just the joy and the learnings, which was not about us going into this community, and it was about our girls actually really benefited from this shared learning experience where they could see that these kids had this amazing school, they had this amazing garden, they could come back to Australia and they could start to create change in their own community. And it was just like incredible.
It's amazing, isn't it? It's bigger than you. The company's bigger than you. And I think in that moment, if I'm correct in saying this, but like you've got the purpose, but when you see that playing out, like you realize just how big it's not about you at all. You're the one who is just the vehicle for this to come through.
Yeah. And just, and you just, when you find that, you've just got to keep reminding yourself of it, because so many times you just feel stuck, but then, and I think it's those times you can unleash so much. Like when you are stuck and you think, that's it, I've got nothing to lose, stuff it, I'm just going to push it as far and as hard and as fast as I can. Yeah. Often that's where the breakthrough comes.
Yeah, it's right at that point, because the universe is testing you. Have you got the guts and have you got the gumption to take it this next bit further? Because oftentimes you need that, and you need to hold on to that moment of seeing your daughter and seeing the girls in the yards in Cambodia with the other kids. You'll need that as an anchor going forward, because the growth that's going to happen in that company, you're going to need to rely on that, because there's going to be bigger decisions and bigger choices to make. And that's going to be something that grounds you in, you can do this.
Yeah. And that's what it does. And that's what I think protects the business, is when you have all sorts of meetings, we want to scale, we need funding, all the rest. You want to protect it, and I often now question, am I protecting it too much? But, you meet with people and the fit's not right. They just want to, ramp the business. They're just a fundamental kind of beneath it lie, it's values that lie beneath it and not aligned. So, yeah.
So you started with the sultanas. How many products do you have now?
We've got about 30 now in our range.
That's massive. Where can people find you?
So we're in Coles, Woolworths, Chemist Warehouse, hopefully soon back on board when the airlines get going again. And
do you have a plan to go international? Or one of the questions I had for you actually was, how do you you're a company within Australia, but when I go like to Terra Madra and places where I shop, I'm looking at the snacks, and I watch this because it's right where the aisle is in Terra Madra, and it's the amount of times that changes, like the number of products in there that change. And Andrew and I call it sometimes gambling. So we might try one new, but we don't know much about the product. What I'm getting at though is, how do you compete in a market that you're an Australian company, but you're actually competing with international companies in those stores? How does that work? How do you, and where do you want to take the company long term in terms of, do you want to go global?
Yeah, we don't have the scale in Australia, so it's really hard. It's a very small market. We do some manufacturing offshore. So we have a great organic manufacturer in Germany and one in the UK. And the reason we found them was that we just couldn't get a consistent supply of organic corn for a product we were doing. And we were able to land the product cheaper and innovate further. And an example is we've just developed a probiotic bite for children that's a snack. It's the first ever plant-based vegan, has omega-3 and 6. But I tried to develop that in the Australian market for a couple of years and could see that gut health was something that was really important. It was important coming through. So our view is we manufacture, we innovate where we can in Australia, but we also use some facilities offshore with a view to bringing it back. But what it will do is open up those markets offshore as well. And I think, I'm starting to realise, I recently just employed the ex-head of operations for Swiss. And he's probably far more experienced than I could ever be in supply chain and operations. And what that's done for me now is to realise, because I was always really scared of, you're going international, you're taking on too much. I'm busy enough. It's just going to become, too busy. Yeah, exactly. But having those people around who are, incredibly experienced, who do carry the same values, I think has made me realise that this could be bigger. And the bigger it is, the more we can affect change. And, we've just gone into
Cambodia, and the more you can put into the charities that you support.
Yeah, that's right. And we're about to launch this month into Singapore, and I'm particularly excited about that market because all of our global competitors will be on that stage, but it's very fragmented. And if we can pull it off as a springboard for the rest of Asia, then, it's going to be big.
Awesome. That's very exciting. No, I'm going to ask a different question. What has been the most difficult decision you've had to make following your sole purpose? And I would consider this your sole purpose, but in running the company, what's the most difficult decision you've had to make? Sorry, I know it's a really big question, isn't it?
It is a big one. It's to put myself out there, just to rip the Band-Aid off, put myself out there, run the business from the heart and in a way that really is true to who I am. And, there's been many moments. We were named in Westpac top 20 businesses of tomorrow, and I was the only woman who was part of that. And we were taken on this global study tour where we went to the head office of Facebook. We met with the founder of LinkedIn, Alan Blue. It was incredible. But I was on a bus with 19 blokes just going, this is really wrong. And it was coming up to International Women's Day, and I just thought, I've just got to call it out. Like, great, so supportive. Love the people I was on the trip with. But and then I read about this Senator Elizabeth Warren, who I don't know if you know the story, but she was in the High Court, and she was saying something, the judge silenced her, and then in the final remarks he said she was silenced, nevertheless she persisted. And so the whole of America kind of started this feminist march that with this catch cry, nevertheless she persisted. And we were to be International Women's Day at the head of the benefit company, Louis Vuitton. And so within God Love America, within a couple of days, I had all these T-shirts printed up for all these blokes saying, nevertheless, she persisted. And on the bus on the way there, I said, will you pose for a photo with me? The head of the magazine, the Australian journalist was there, head of the business editor and a photographer. And so every single one of them put a T-shirt on.
All these guys.
And then this thing started to happen where they were going to the corner of the room, and the journalist from the Australian was taking a selfie in this T-shirt and sent it to his wife, his mother, his daughter, his sister, saying, Happy International Women's Day. And that was just like, it was incredible, just speaking out and speaking up and just seeing that, you know, that's how you create change in a way that's really inclusive. So I think that the hard thing is just having the guts to call things out and to do things your way.
How can we teach our daughters, apart from being the example? Because I know that that's the best thing that we can do is be the example. But where do you think we need to start with education for children, men, girls and boys, but giving girls the confidence to be able to do this, to not question themselves, so that they're not just the one person sitting on that bus, so that it's half and half?
Yeah. There's a few things, like you learn all these techniques, you know, like power poses. And I did a public speaking course where I heard about the lizard voice. And I couldn't believe, you know, we sat in this room of women and talked about this little voice inside your head that says, you're going to get up on that stage. No, you're going to stuff up. You can't do that. You know,
I think we've all got that voice.
You know, we've all got it. And how do you silence that voice? And this process was to imagine that voice, just visualize what does it look like and give it a name. And then when you're about to get out there, send it on its way. And it was a really powerful process. But I also heard women who, you know, they had the opportunity to share what their voice was saying to them. And oh my God, you wouldn't talk to people that way, let alone what these voices were saying. And I ended up getting this little diamante kind of lizard brooch that was given to me, and I took it home, and Chloe was fascinated, you know, as an 8-year-old kid. So I started talking to her about that little voice in her head, and then she quickly identified it, and she'd come home from school saying, you know, Holly's really nervous about her test. She's, you know, that's just, she called it Lizzie. That's just Lizzie talking. And I taught her about power poses and all of those things you can give girls to give them the confidence to, you know, take their place and to be, you know, but equally I think boys need to be educated. And I think there's a lot of unconscious bias within the community where people perhaps don't realise what they're portraying and the impact that's having on their kids. But I've been always super conscious of it. You know, I got rid of very early on, we had this big mirror in our house. In fact, we were talking about it last night, and I'd sort of walk past it and look at myself all the time. Then I noticed my daughter as a 3-year-old mimicking me. And
Yep.
I had this thing where through training, through the fitness industry, I would stand on the scales every day, and I was like, I've just got to get rid of these. This is like these chains that I can't have this for my daughter. So
Judgment.
have just made a huge effort, yeah, just to get rid of all that stuff. And I have a daughter who's so, you know, she's confident, she's self-assured, she's very shy, but she has this quiet confidence about her. So I think there's lots of ways that we can, just being aware of it. And then I have a little boy now who I'm teaching to be really empathetic, and, you know, they're different. You have that whole nature-nurture debate, and there is there's an element of when he was born, he was just this little man who's super confident and all the rest. But yeah, I think it's, as parents, it's our it's really important for us to just open their view.
Yep, I agree totally. With 6 kids and 2 grandchildren, my level of wanting to do better has amplified since I've had the grandchildren. Like, it was there when I had the kids, but it's more important now that they understand that, because I've got 2 boy grandchildren. Easton's 2 and a bit, and Ashton's only 5 weeks old. But I want to leave a legacy for them. Like, I want to leave a legacy for my children, but I've seen that my legacy as a parent is more important to the way I parented my children is now coming forward in my grandchildren. So I talked about this last week on Facebook or on one of my stories, that I saw my son telling Easton to say goodbye to me. He said, go up and say goodbye to Mopsy and give her a hug and give her a kiss. And Easton didn't want to. He just wanted to get in the car and go. And I'm like, it's fine. He doesn't have to. And Kelvin was not forcing him, but pushing him to say, because Kelvin didn't want me to feel upset or hurt that Easton hadn't hugged and kissed me. And I'm like, it's actually okay. It's fine. And I realized at that point that Kelvin was just doing what I taught him to do. So how I taught my children is coming through more in my grandchildren. So that has like ramped up a whole lot more for me now. So I'm really conscious of the way I speak and what I'm putting out into the world, because they're all watching.
Yeah, it's so important. And the other thing with business and making a difference, you know, it doesn't have to, and this whole notion of legacy, It doesn't have to be. For me, my biggest legacy is my kids. And yeah, I heard Blake Mykoski from Tom's Shoes. I met him, and he was amazing. Every pair of shoes he produces, he gives to a child.
Another,
Yeah, but his whole thing is, he said it didn't have to be however many million shoes. He said it could have been 2 pairs of shoes from my apartment, and there and then I'm still making a difference. It's an attitude. It's, you know,
yeah, it's awesome. It's serving, and I think
yes.
Yeah, the higher we make the priority of serving, the more we can give and the more that comes to us.
Yeah, for sure.
I know we're on limited time here, so I'm going to probably ask you just 1 or 2 more questions. What would your best advice be to somebody starting a business?
I think it always comes back to just really take your time, research it well. There's often a hesitant, a want to just get out there and make it happen quickly because you don't want someone else to do it. But I think the more prepared you are, the better. So we spent 3 years researching what we were doing and establishing the brand. And I think that's really served us well. Like, we created our vision, just really reflect on purpose, why you're doing it.
Yeah, and stick with that. What would you want people to remember about this conversation, and where can they find you, and how can they support you? Actually, we only briefly touched on that. You talked about the company going public. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so we're running a crowdfunding campaign. We want to raise, and I've hesitated for a while. We've always been 100% owned, but we need some funding to, a seed round to help us scale the business. And I think Westpac opened my eyes to the opportunity if we do, bring on the right support and the right funds, what we could do as a business. So we decided we would launch a crowdfunding campaign. So anyone can get on board if they really believe in what we're doing. So for as little as $250, you can invest, you can buy shares in the business, and there's rewards associated with that, but you can be on the journey with us. And to me, again, as a community-based business, it just feels so right that we're doing that, I believe everyone should have a chance to invest in brands they really love. So people can find us in the supermarkets and absolutely 100% come on board, purchase our products, and the more we sell, the more we can create change and make a difference. But also, if they really believe in our values and what we represent, then invest in the business.
Yeah, and that's at birchal.com.
Yeah, it's Birchal, BIRCHAL.com, and it's /company/Whole Kids. And that
if you just go onto that website, if you didn't get all of that down there, because we've invested as well. If you go onto birchal.com and you look up Whole Kids, and it actually is one of the first ones that pops up. It's a new one there. So,
great. Yeah.
Very easy.
That's open until the 29th of October.
Awesome. Thanks so much for being with us today, Monica. This was really, really good.
Yeah, you're welcome. So good to catch up again.
Yeah, nice to see you again.
Yeah.